Please move to the left. But I want to introduce our board members. Here in the front is Miss Julie Foudy. She's doing some real work, just moving chairs around, helping, and also assisting her is our board member Jeff Knapp, who's also helping out in respect. And we have our board president, Vernell Gregg, here. So thank you for showing up. Our board has done a great job during these sessions. There's been board members at every single session. So it's nice to have them involved in showing their support. I want to just quickly kick off what we're doing and why we're doing this. There's a lot of challenges we're facing right now in public schools and education, and several things. I think it's kind of like a convergence that's occurring, that I think it's the right time for us to come together and discuss public schools and education of our children. And I want to just kind of mention two or three things that seem to be bringing us to a crossroads and making this a time where we should be having these kinds of conversations. Not the least of which is finance. We've been losing money for a number of years now in public schools. As a matter of fact, I've been a superintendent for 16 years, and I told someone this week I've had to cut. We've cut every year that I've been a superintendent. It's been cuts have been necessary, but nothing like this year. As you are aware, the legislature met, and there was a very, very difficult financial issues in the legislature. And for all school districts had dramatic cuts in their budgets this year. But LISD suffered their own shortfalls in funding. Over the next 2 years, our school district will lose $54 million. And that's a lot of money under any circumstance, and I think for any business to have $54 million less than you had the year before would be a huge blow to deal with. And I think the fact that this has been a trend is a reason why we need to be looking at what we're doing. I think there's several of my colleagues, we've had discussions, we've been working together for a number of years now. And our belief is that schools have not changed a lot, really, at all. There's been amounts of reform, but there has not been a great deal of change. And since A Nation at Risk in the 80s, there's been attempts at reform, but schools have essentially remained the same. I think what we're seeing in terms of the funding issues is we're not going to see much more money if we don't find different ways of doing things. So there's the funding deal. There's also the fact that we're under increased competition. An analogy I've been giving is that AT&T, before they broke up about 20 years ago, used to have an advertisement that we may be the only phone company in town, but we try not to act like it. Well, they did try to act like it. It's kind of a similar thing for schools. We've been the only phone company in town when it comes to education, but that's not the case anymore. There's a lot of competition for education these days, and it comes from a variety of sources. Private schools have always been here, but charter schools is a growing phenomenon. But probably the biggest challenge in terms of competition is 24/7, anytime, anywhere learning that's offered by the internet. And more and more people are availing themselves of that, not just for public education, but for higher ed. Right now, the University of Phoenix is the largest university in the United States. So you think about that, an online school that's now larger than any other school in the U.S., and we're seeing more and more organizations that are stepping forward and realizing there's money to be had in education, and they're offering that. There's big changes also. There was a book published by a Harvard professor, Disrupting Class, in which he predicted, he's not an education professor, he's a business professor, he predicted that public schools will lose half of their students within 20 years because of online learning. That's principally what he studied. That doesn't mean that's going to happen, but I think what it does mean that if we do value the importance of community schools, and that's what public schools are. To me, one of the great values of public schools is that they bring community together. Imagine an online educational entity having a meeting like this. It's not going to happen. Or imagine a Friday night football game or a concert where thousands of people show up to see what our students do. Only public schools can do those kinds of things, and public schools build community. So it could be catastrophic if his predictions are true. But what do we do about that? Is it something that we want to happen, or do we want to keep public schools strong? And the impact of technology in other ways. Besides online learning, 24/7 learning, it's changing the way we live. And Shannon's going to ask you a few questions, and she said, "You quit stealing my thunder here." But just a quick question: how many have on you here a smartphone? Okay, are there any iPads in here? Look there. A year from now, there's going to be a lot more. So everybody in here is equipped with web-enabled technology, and that's how people live and work today. So that's making a big impact. And other things that are happening from a technological perspective. Had a gentleman come to our midday meeting yesterday. He was born and raised in India, came over here and got a master's degree in engineering, started a software firm. He's got employees here in Flower Mound, and he has 100 employees in India. He's able to run his business that way because essentially fiber cable is free. So, we wake up in the morning, we find out what the Asian markets have done. And that's kind of a predictor of what the American markets are going to do. It's a global business climate in which our kids are going to be working. An interesting story yesterday on Yahoo News. Researchers have been studying for decades, trying to isolate an enzyme in the HIV virus. They've not been able to do it, isolate it and unravel it. They've not been able to do it. The University of Washington created a video game and got some video gamers together where the object was to find and unravel this enzyme. They competed against each other in this video game and solved it in 10 days. And it's real science. It was published in a medical journal this week. So you think about the impact, the learning potential that's there. Anybody seen a bunch of kids playing video games? Do they look up? Do they check the clock? But this has real scientific ramifications. So what do we do about that? One final thing, and I'll stop. A couple, 3 weeks ago, a young lady from Hebron High School came to see me. Her name's Erin. She's a senior, and we were having a conversation about some of this stuff. And I said, "Erin, do you realize," I said, "are you 17? Are you a senior?" "Yes." "You're 17? "Yes." "Do you realize your senior class will be the first class that graduates that's been born since the World Wide Web was invented? Last year's senior class was the last class born before the invention of the World Wide Web." I said, let's talk about some of the changes since then. iPods in the early part of this century. Google in the early part of this century. Then the iPhone. Then the iPad. And I said, the changes that have happened within the lifetime of a 17-year-old has been phenomenal. And it's changed the lives of everyone in this room, everyone in the world. I said, people reach their prime leading the world in business, in law, in government, when they're in their 50s and 60s. I said, "Erin, when will you be 57? She thought about it. Good math teachers over there at Hebron. She said, 2061. I said, exactly, 2061. I said, let me ask you this question, Erin. If so much change has happened in your lifetime, 17 years, what will the world be like in 2061? And I said, that's the challenge we face. We have no way of knowing, yet we have to do it right, because Erin expects to have a happy, productive, successful life and a great world in which to raise her children. That's what she expects and all of our kids expect. But because it's going to be so difficult to understand what they need, I know I'm not smart enough to do that by myself. And that's the reason we're having these meetings. Because if we come together as a community, that I believe that we can do a good job of deciding what it's going to take to ensure the errands of that happy, productive life. Last few years, we've seen all decisions about schools moving to the state and now the national government. We have a chance to take that back as a local community. Austin and Washington do not love our children more than we do at the local level. And we can come together as a local community and talk about these problems and make sure our kids have the kind of educational opportunities that they need and they deserve. So at this time, I want to introduce our consultant that's going to work with you. She's wonderful. She's done a super job this week. Her name's Shannon Burke. She's been a teacher. She's been an administrator, an assistant superintendent at Coppell. She's been a consultant in education around the country and also in the United Kingdom, and she's just really fun to work with. So please give a warm welcome to Shannon Burke.
I'm so excited that this is our 5th summit that we've had so far. And we're still getting a great turnout in this community. And that's such a testament to you all and the fact that you care about your kids in this community and what happens in education. And so I'm so pleased with that. And also I have to tell you, because we've had 4 already, we've heard so many great ideas that I'm just anticipating even more from you all today. It's been great conversation and dialogue, and that's really the way we are working these. It's not me talking at you, although there will be a little of some things that I will share with you. But really, the magic of the summits is your interaction and your dialogue and your ideas being shared back and your input that the district is desiring. So we're going to start just to kind of get a gauge of our audience here to find out who all's in the room. So parents of school-aged children, will you raise your hand if you have kids in school today? Fantastic. Let's applaud our parents for the great job they do. It's not. I have a 15-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. I'm missing him a little right now, but anyway, and they are in school in South Texas where we live now, and they went to school here in the Metroplex in both Richardson and Coppell. And so I know that there's a lot going on in your life if you have kids in school. There's a lot that you are responsible for and a lot that you're doing. So we appreciate you being here today. How many of you are here and you actually are community members but you don't have school-aged children right now? How many of you? Wow, thank you. Let's applaud those people. Thank you for being here even though you don't have kids in school and you want to come out and engage in this dialogue with us. Because it's so important. It really does take, and I'm glad that the administration here understands this, it really does take the entire community to make the right decisions for the students. And it takes the entire community not just to make the right decisions and not just to come here and give input, but I want to charge you, because I get to facilitate this process in other places, that it's not just about coming here and giving your input, but it's also about helping to carry those things out once you've decided what you want to do. So you have a responsibility as a community member, if you want quality of life in your community and for the students, to be a part of that, to be a partner with the school district. And that's why the school district is inviting you in to share in that. And so, it can happen, and it does happen that I won't work for superintendents that say to me, we have some ideas that we want to carry out, and we need to get buy-in from our community. You ever heard that word? Buy-in. Get buy-in, yeah. So can you help us get buy-in? And I say, no, I won't do that because I don't want to waste people's time and energy bringing them into a process when that's all it's about. But really, if you truly are seeking input, then I'm all about helping you with that. I'm all about facilitating that because I believe, I told you I have 2 kids. I do this because I believe that we have to come together in local context, make decisions for schools in local context to make a difference for our students and what they're going to be facing in the world that they're going to live in. And I believe that impacts my own children, even though we don't live in the Metroplex anymore. I believe that what happens here has an impact on them. And so I want to actually applaud the administration, the school board and administration for inviting you here today and inviting you into this process. Can we say thank you for that? Because it does take courage, right, to just open the doors. They could go away in a room somewhere and make these decisions all on their own. They have the right to do that. But it takes courage to say no. Not only do we not want to do that, we want to be transparent. We actually want you involved in the decision-making process. So they're inviting you in to be a part of that, and so that's exciting. Our agenda is really about, it's starting with what you hope for students, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how education has changed over time and the context that we're in today as a result. Dr. Waddell talked a lot about that earlier. And so we're going to talk about that just a little bit and then get into, okay, if this is what you're hoping for students, and these are the kinds of skills that they need to have in this time frame that we're living in, then what does learning need to look like? What do they need to be doing every day to get prepared for that? And then what does teaching look like? How can we support teachers in the role that they play in that process, which is obviously the most important role in the education system, being a former teacher, and knowing how that job is and knowing what the research says about that. How does that teaching role work? And then the last piece of this is just, so what do we need to do with the system? What do we need to change about the system to make sure teachers can do what they want to do for students and students can get what they want to get? So that's kind of the way we're going to work it. So I know you'll have ideas on all those different levels, and maybe we'll just try to keep it to whatever that topic is at the time. So we'll get to each of those levels over the course of the time that we're going to be here today. So we're going to start with this idea of, you remember, for those of you that have kids in school, you remember the day that you sent your first one to kindergarten?
Yes.
You remember? Like yesterday, right? Even my sophomore, I can remember that day. And knowing from being a teacher how fast it was going to go from there. Some people say that's the boohoo day, and some people say that's the Yahoo day. But so you send them off, and you have hopes, right? They're going to spend a significant amount of their life in school. And so you have hopes for what happens there as a result, right? You want certain things for them as a result of sending them to school. That's why you choose to do it. And like Dr. Waddell said, now people have choices about that. But those of you that are choosing to keep your kids in public school, you have hopes for that. So that's what I want us to talk about first off, is just what are our highest hopes? What are we wanting for our students? And what are we hoping that they're going to get out of school? And so here's the format we're going to use. You're just going to talk with your neighbors around you for a few minutes just to generate ideas, and then we're going to share out to the whole group. So we're going to take 2 minutes, and I want you to share with your neighbors. If you want to take notes from your conversation, that's fine. But what are your highest hopes? What are you hoping for? Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. So here's what we'll do. We have, I think, do we have 4? Yeah, we have 4 microphones. And so we'll just look for you. You'll just raise your hand. You'll get a mic. And then if you don't mind, please standing up. By the way, we are video recording, if you can't tell. But we are video recording because we are posting these tomorrow for everybody to be able to look at and view each one and hear the input from each session. I know, actually, I've talked to some people today that said they have come back for seconds. Or thirds, which thank you for coming back again, because they're interested in the input that we're getting at each one, and so you'll have those available to watch online. And so if you don't mind, we're trying to record what people are saying. So if you'll stand up and use the microphone, that'll be great. And the other thing I'll ask you is maybe not standing up more than once and maybe not repeating. Then we'll get more people. We have a lot of people here, and we'd like to hear as many voices as we can. So who would like to share with us your highest hopes for students in LISD? Go ahead and start us off. Great. And if you want the mic, go ahead. We have 4, so you can go ahead and raise your hand, and they'll get one to you while she's talking. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was talking to people here, and we kind of agree that we need more independent and creative thinkers.
Great. So independent, creative thinkers. Fantastic. You have a microphone? Go.
When I think about the educational system and my highest hopes for it here locally, I'm hoping that our children get a very comprehensive, holistic educational experience. So that's not only about preparing them for the book smarts, but appreciating diversities and culturals and internal as well as intrinsic as well as extrinsic backgrounds. Appreciating that. That way, when we compare ourselves nationally, we rank high. Mm-hmm. When we begin to compare ourselves internationally, we can set the bar for how perhaps the United States needs to gear their educational systems to where we are actually competitive in the international marketplace. So setting it that much higher.
Fantastic. So really, I do believe what she's saying. I believe that what you do here locally can become a model for the nation. It can. And then it can have an impact, like you're saying, on the ability to compete internationally. So fantastic. Thank you. Who has a mic? Oh, yes.
I come from a background of teaching in public school, teaching in private school, and teaching in homeschool group settings.
Great.
And homeschooling, they do have football games and big meetings like this, and so there are other options. But the big thing that's drawing people out of the public school system is they want their child treated individually. Each child has God-given talents and uniquenesses. And sometimes it takes a longer period of time to identify those, but that's what parents want. They want those identified, and they want them developed. And they want their child, the highest hopes, is not that they would be able to recite something, but that they would have a love for learning. And so if you give them, if you teach to their giftedness and their talent, if you identify it, they will accelerate. But if you push them into a box, you're just going to get minimal.
Fantastic. So that individualization and recognizing the individual talents of every child. Thank you. Great.
I think a hope that I personally have is just as this technology is coming our way, it's integrating itself into our schools. One, that the theme of public schools is equality, that children aren't left behind who do not have the finances for that. But two, that we somehow balance the amazing benefits while also protecting our campuses from things that aren't beneficial and distractions when it comes to technology, because it is a part of their world. It will be a part of their world. But teaching them how to focus on the important tasks and integrate technology into that learning process rather than it being a distraction.
So your hopes for students are that they will be able to successfully integrate that technology and balance that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Right here.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Evelyn. I think, coming from an education background, my hope for the students of Louisville would be to have members strategically look at the needs of all our kids from every socioeconomic background. I think especially during our times right now, we're leaving a lot of kids behind, not just meeting their basic needs, but, there's a lot of kids who don't have the support at home to help with homework, to help with the math, and, those tough subjects. So I think, we have to look at, I don't want to call it a surrogate parent, but there is a way that we're going to have to bridge the gap between parents and the education system in order to meet all the kids' needs. So that means if kids need the tutoring, if kids need resources, I think really all parents love our children enough to where we want them to succeed. Some of us just don't know what that looks like or how to get them there. So I think it's important that we don't leave anyone behind, and giving them the tools they need in order to be successful after school hours, because that's when a lot of the learning and application take place as well. And the studying, I think, from tutoring, I've seen a lot of kids struggle, and not everybody has access to the resources they need in order to be successful. And, then you have the dropout rate, and you have the kids who are just going through the system and getting further behind. So I would just like to see a board or, members kind of look at the kids, from different diversity backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds, and seeing what do we do to bring them all up together without leaving anyone behind.
Fantastic. Which is similar also to the other thing that you said from earlier, just making sure they have equal access to resources, but you're saying not just in school, but also the things that happen outside of school. Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, our group talked about our highest hope for our children was truly to be motivated and thoroughly prepared for college.
Okay.
Just in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Motivated and prepared. Yes.
We had several things that are repeated, but two things we talked about was learning that's engaging and that's not just good old school textbook. But on the flip side, aside from education, is the respect factor. The thing that I always struggle with, even when there are other kids or parents around, is I think society's level of respect for each other has declined tremendously. And it's scared. My husband and I talked about this meeting today, and he said unless parents are willing to discipline and train their children correctly, none of this will matter. And I agree with the woman in the back about not all parents know what that looks like because they didn't receive that training growing up. But our public schools are a horrible example to the outside if we aren't respecting each other. The diversity, the differences, the disabilities, the successes. And when I walk through a hallway, to have a child say, "Hello, Mrs. Davenport," that's a big difference versus, "Hey." And we're responsible for that. And they're going to head off into this business world, and it's embarrassing. So that's My big.
So your hopes are that they will.
My hopes are that they
respect.
can speak in a public setting. They can greet adults and children alike with respect, eye contact, a hello, a yes, ma'am. We're in the South.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, we lived in the Northwest in Portland, Oregon for a while, and I was adamant my kids were going to keep the yes, ma'am, no, ma'am while they were there, but people would be like, huh? What? You know, the adults. So, where's the other mic? Are we feeling like we're kind of gotten here? Somebody. Come on, fast with that.
We talked about making sure our children had resources, whether they were planning to go to college or not. That some of our children are going to go to college, and that's great, but I think we're leaving the children behind that are not going to go to college. There are the college path kids, and then there's the unskilled laborers, and we do need skilled laborers who aren't going to college, and so the schools could address that also.
Okay. So the multiple pathways for different students, depending on their goals. Here's one.
Hi, Cammie Hilliard. Some of the things that we talked about was first, teaching our children that they actually have many options out there in life. We feel that some of the teachers or the schools are pressuring our students to go to college. That's great. My son, he will be going to college, but as you all know, there's a lot of jobs out there that don't require a college education. So educating them to let them know that there's many, many different types of options. And also teaching diversity. In this day and age, all of our kids need to understand that there's diversity out there, and it exists in the workplace and in everything that we do in our lives.
Okay, so them having an understanding of diversity and multiple options that they have. I think, does somebody have the mic over here? Yes, sir.
I'm a teacher and a parent, and we talked about I would like our students to obviously make use of the technology and the internet, and it makes me wonder how we did things before 10 years ago. I don't know how I found things out, but everything is just so quick. But along with another parent said that I think we need to make sure that the schools teach collaborative effort and social skills and learning to work with others, because technology can sometimes isolate a person. So I think it's important that as we're using technology that we make sure that we're still teaching that sense of community that Dr. Waddell talked about. And I know, just as an example, we talked about texting, and my children, I have 2 teenagers, and they are not as proficient at having a conversation as when I was that age, because you text, you instantly send what you want to say into the conversation. You don't wait. There's no nuances or anything, and I think we need to make sure that they are going to be learning with technology, there's no doubt, but we want to learn that social skills, problem solving, and collaboration with others, other humans, a very important part of our education system.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll take this last one. Yes.
I think to build on that, I think there's a real lack of teaching critical thinking skills, and right now I think it's more an emphasis on teaching the kids the answer to a test or a question, rather than teaching the process of how do they find out for themselves how to find the answer. I think that better prepares them for when they get on to college and life in general.
Okay, so your hopes is that they will learn how to be independent thinkers and be able to find the answers on their own. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay, you can clap. I didn't mean to stop you. The gentleman in the back will make that the last one.
Yes. My apology in advance if you've already addressed this, because I was a few minutes behind.
That's all right.
Specifically, some kind of roadmap for IB programs. I don't know if LISD has it on their radar. Also, any kind of thought on partnering with Ivy Leagues when it comes to distant learning. As we see, there's heavy concentration of Ivy League schools in Northeast. But more and more campuses are partnering with other areas, offering up to like free classes. Stanford just had a free robotic class. So I don't think that distance should matter anymore. Speaking of technology, so if you could share some light on it.
Okay, and can I we are talking about, that's kind of methods, and we're going to get to more of that, but what are you hoping for students as a result of those things that you were talking about? What are you hoping that they'll gain as a result of some of
Things
those
like, we're living in an age where we see younger entrepreneurs, they're inventing stuff at much younger age. So having access to Ivy Leagues where state-of-the-art stuff is happening vis-a-vis through Ivy programs, if our kids have an avenue, an extension of math and science clubs, or any kind of invention-related setup to where they have access, they can learn and observe through online technologies, that would be great.
Okay, so more inventiveness, innovation, spurred kind of thinking with those partnerships.
That's correct.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, great. Okay.
Hi.
Last one.
I would just like to have, and I prayed about it, talked about it, my husband and I, what we dream for our kids is just have well-rounded children. And I would love to preserve the arts as well as get our math and science up so we can keep our kids competitive. But I have two very creative children, a boy and a girl, as well as my son is very literal, so he's very mathematic. But I would love to preserve both because I really think they produce well-rounded individuals, and we can communicate with others, and we can utilize our brain more. So arts and science and math.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. So this is the beginning of a conversation, and I'm sure there are more of you that had some thoughts that you weren't able to share just yet. But I want to tell you a couple of things about that. We have the same questions that we're asking here. We are providing online for folks to go in and share. So we know that there are a lot of people coming, and we're so excited about that. And we want to provide venues for all of you to share your thoughts if you want. And then also, we'll talk a little later about it, but if you signed up outside, yes, I want to be involved in the process. There are other opportunities that we're going to have for you to be involved in smaller settings to share information as well. So that all of those kind of things are coming up. But you're always obviously welcome to share those thoughts that you have maybe written down or from your conversations online. The reason we start here, by the way, with our hopes, and we'll get to okay, and then what do we do about it, is that you have to really know where you're going, right? Stephen Covey says you have to begin with the end in mind. Then you can order your directions, your steps to get there. And we heard some allusions to the fact that maybe we haven't done that so much lately. There's a lot of things been reformed in education and stuff thrown at education, just different initiatives, but maybe not with the thought of a clear end. Where are we headed? So that's really this process, the beginning of it, the part of it that we're trying to work on at the beginning of the process is where are we trying to get to? For students, right? For students. Yogi Berra maybe said it more clear. It's like if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to end up someplace else. And that may be what's kind of been taking place, right? It's just not having that clear vision. Another reason Dr. Waddell alluded to earlier is just resources. How many of you that are staff in the audience, raise your hand if you just really can't find things to fill up your day? Oh, no, nobody. Okay, that's good, because if you raise your hand, you're probably out of a job. But right, we're all full, right? You're probably working a lot more than you ever intended to work in the job that you're in currently. And then I know that the school board and Dr. Waddell and Dr. Burnett are probably not sitting around also trying to figure out what to do with all the extra money in the school district, right? That's probably not a problem that they have. So here's the thing that's happening in schools right now is that there's a lot of what I like to call random acts of good intention, right? We're all trying to do the right things for kids, really. Those of you that are in the room that are employees and those of you that are parents that work in the schools, you know that for the most part, we're all trying to do the right things for kids in education. And there are lots of good programs out there. I get to travel the country and I get to see, I have the privilege of seeing a lot of great things happening in different schools across the country. But what I see most often is that there's so much going on that sometimes we're at cross purposes. We have this thing happening and this thing happening, and they're almost in conflict with each other, and then we have these 5 things happening that one of them could do it, but we're doing 5 things to get there. And so we have this kind of inefficiency, really, in our operations, and most of that time that happens because there's not really a clear idea of where we're trying to get to. We have kind of a vague idea, but not a clear idea. So this really is a process that will help you focus your resources. Those precious human resources, staff, employees, faculty, that are working harder and harder to try to get the same things done because of added things to the plate, focusing that and taking things off the plate so that we can focus and use those human resources wisely, time and money, in the same way, especially as those resources are shrinking, because they are going to continue to do that over time. So it's really important to think about how to focus those things and make the best use of them. And so I want to talk for a minute about how we can make that happen. And one of the things we want to clarify is, what is the purpose, right? What is the purpose of education? Really, you've all said it already in your hopes for students. But what is it, really? Why do we send kids to school? What's the general purpose? Raise good citizens. That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of summarize it that way, so that we can have an educated citizenry. And as a society, we invest in education, in free public education for all. We invest in that as a society, and other societies do the same, so that we have productive citizens, right? That we can perpetuate our society. And people alluded to this. Economy, so that we can have a strong economy, quality of life, and perpetuate our culture. That's why a society invests in education. So has the purpose of education, just since we've had really kind of mass-produced free public education, has the purpose changed? No, not really, right? That was really the original purpose for doing that, and it's still the same purpose today to continue to do that. Has the context changed in the last 100 years? Yeah, significantly, right? Yeah, in the last 5 years? Yeah, in the last 5 minutes? So yes, the context, although the purpose is still the same, the context has definitely changed within which we're trying to achieve that same purpose. And so have the methods changed? Okay, so the jury's out on that a little, right? Some, maybe not. Have we really thought through that? I want to give you a really quick story that my dad used to tell us that I think illustrates this. There's actually a lot of, there's a great book called Barbarians to Bureaucrats by Lawrence Miller, where, yeah, the title gives you a hint, about kind of the life cycle of organizations and how they work. At one point, I think we thought, kind of in the rise of the corporation, apparently, I wasn't there at the time, so I shouldn't say we maybe, but the thought was that if we could just figure out how to make an organization real efficient, if we could get it on the right track, it would grow or at least maintain itself over time, right? But what we've learned is that's not necessarily true. It doesn't just keep growing, because if context changes, you can't just keep using the same methods, right? So my dad used to tell us this story about when he and my mom got married, and she was cooking a roast in the kitchen, and he went in and was watching what she was doing for a minute, and she cuts the ends off the roast, and he says, well, why are you doing that? Why are you cutting the ends off? And she said, well, because that's what Mom always did. And she grew up on a farm, and she ended up cooking for the hired hands at a very young age and watching her mother cook. And so he said, okay. And so the next Sunday, they go for Sunday dinner. Y'all know when dinner happens? What time of day is that? Yeah, that's right. I would get dinner dates in college and show up at the wrong time all the time until I learned about lunch and dinner. Anyway, but we went for Sunday dinner, and so my dad asks my grandmother, my granny, so why do you cut the ends off your roast? And she says, I don't know. That's what my mom always did. So that's how I learned to do it. So he says, okay, we were in a farm family, so really, my grandmother was 31 when I was born. So all my great-grandparents were alive when I was born. I knew them all. And so he goes to Grandma McKinley's next, goes into town and says, okay, so Grandma Mac, why did you always cut the ends off the roast when you cooked the roast? And she goes, well, because my pan was too short. Okay, so the purpose, I just thought of the fact how this illustrates this, right? My dad was, for a totally different reason, asking those questions. But for our intents, what we're trying to describe here is the purpose of all of those women who are all great cooks was the same, to cook a good roast, right? Right? What happened was my granny and my mom didn't understand that the method that Grandma Mac was using wasn't necessary to cook a good roast. It was just about context, right? That method was tied to the context at the time, a small pan. But they both had different tools. They had bigger pans. So they could have used different methods once that context changed, but they just thought that method was part of the purpose, right? Part of achieving the purpose. So the thought is here that when the context changes, we can change our methods, right? And sometimes we have to. Sometimes the same methods won't even work to achieve that purpose, right? They don't even work anymore because we don't understand that the results have to be different to achieve that purpose. Okay, so that's really the whole goal of what we're talking about here, is as the context changes over time, and in education it has, we don't want this to happen, right? We don't want to miss the opportunity to change our methods and then have a decline. And because one of the things that happens on that downhill slide, if you read that book, is that you have to work a lot harder, a lot longer hours, and do a lot more things to try to get the same results. And over time, even that won't work. Over time, when the context changes and you don't change methods and you keep doing more of it, even that won't work. So we want to talk just real briefly about where we got this kind of education history and what our methods have been over time and how they match the context. So maybe we can learn from that, because you don't just throw everything out. You want to learn from what's worked in the past, right? And see what we can still use that makes sense in the current context that we live in today. So these are some paintings from what time period? You know, like 1800s, late 1800s, showing life and kind of work, things that are happening during that time. And this is a schoolhouse, one-room schoolhouse. You know, you probably recognize this, right? You see how it's set up. You see how the kids are working. And really, in this context, we're going to call this Education 1.0. Okay? So this is kind of our first conception of what education would look like. And it really matched the times, right? You see the times. You see what are they doing in their work during that time? What's the work about? Yeah, mostly farming, right? Mostly farming. And what kind of interactions did they have with each other? How did they learn about their work during that time? They learned from each other, right? They learned from somebody else that knew how to do it. They learned from that person, right? Usually different generations sometimes passed it down, etc. Okay, so the context was this agriculture, some artisanry. They had this kind of, you had to work with small groups, you know, cooperate to get some things done. Apprentice model, like you mentioned. They had a variety of tasks. You had to do a lot of different things to make that farm work. I grew up on a farm. Hand tools typically were what they were. So the methods in school at that time, you can see how that kind of matched, right? People were taught the basics of literacy. You know why we get out for summer? It's a harvest, right? How many harvested this past summer? 1, 2, okay. So some still do, right? Yeah, how in this heat, she says, yeah, really. So some still do, but the idea of getting out for summer, it was very important at that time. It was critical, actually, to the economy of the time. You had to have the students out of school or the economy would not have worked at the time. So, but it's not necessarily critical to our economy now with the advent of technology and other things to have that, all the people out of school to do that. But we still have that same calendar. I'm not necessarily saying we should give it up. But it is a point to say, and maybe it's, for tourism now. Maybe that's part of the economic reason to keep doing it. I don't know. But if you look at the research about what happens to the brain over those, the lapse over those few months, then for educational purposes, maybe we should think about it. So the purpose is still the same. The context is different. So this is another opportunity to think about the method, like why we're doing certain things in this context. Does it still make sense? Maybe it does. I don't know. They were using cooperative small group work, apprentice model, multi-generational, in the same classroom, different age students, teaching each other, right? Same kind of thing they were doing in life and in work, variety of tasks in one setting. Okay, context changed. What time period is this? Industrial Revolution. You can see the workplace, right? It looks different than what we just saw. Different kind of work going on. What kind of, in this, so we're going to call this Education 2.0. Right? We had Education 1.0, this Education 2.0. This is a setting in the classroom, and do you see how it imitates that workplace? Right? Yeah? So what kind of, these are cute too. What kind of tasks were important at this point in time in industry, in the workplace? What's the context? What's that? Repetitive tasks, right? Repetitive tasks. Absolutely. What in the industry of the time was, textiles, manufacturing, that kind of thing. So we have this kind of context now, right? So if we're thinking about school as preparation for life, we have this kind of context, this manufacturing, processing kind of work. The work is solitary work, like I do my thing, but in a group with a lot of people around me also doing their thing, right? So, and like it was mentioned, repetitive tasks, same task at the same time according to a bell kind of stuff. That's what's happening in the workplace at this time. So you need a manager model, not an apprentice model for this. You've got a lot of people doing the same thing, so it's like show them what to do, they memorize it, they do it, and you make sure they're not distracted by each other, right? So you need managers, and then you need workers. So method in the classroom, really smart. fit the context. Education 2.0 was a good fit for that context, right? One-size-fits-all system, a sorting and tracking system. How were our students sorted? By age, right. Exactly. Like Ken Robinson says, by date of manufacture. One size fits all. So sorting, tracking. We already heard in your hopes several people alluding to we need it to be more individualized. And that's because we're trapped in a system right now that is not. That is one size fits all, right? And how many of you have more than one child? How many of you, those children are exactly the same? No, not at all, right? They're so different. You think you got it down on the first one, and then the second one comes, and you're like, oh, yeah, different manual. So at that time it worked. It worked well. At the time we conceived the Education 2.0, it worked well. I mean, we became the #1 economy in the world as a result. So we're not saying it was the wrong thing to do in education. We're just saying the context changed, right? The context has changed. So solitary work in a group setting, manager model, rote memorization, all those things fit. All those things fit, right? So it was actually it's actually got a name, the Platoon School, an improved school machine. And we did something pretty amazing that other industrializing nations are trying to copy now, which is how many students we were putting through the system. Over the last 50 years, even, or 100 years, we've gotten better even at including all students in the system. I'm not saying addressing all students' needs, but I'm saying including all students in the system. So, has the context changed from Education 2.0? Why has the context changed? Sure, different type of people. Technology has impacted that, right? I want you to quickly brainstorm a list of technology that students have available today that you didn't have growing up. Very good. So what kinds of things do they have? This lady up here said everything. Everything, right? Computers, portability, smart computers. What? I'm sorry? Video games, internet, DVDs, remote what? Remote everything. Yeah, virtual and remote everything, right? TV's in the car. Everything travels with you. Everything's portable. Everything's on your person wherever you go. Exactly. Microwaves. Yeah. A lot of kids don't know how to. It depends on your age. Don't judge people. So obviously, lots of different kinds of technology that they have available. And it has changed the world. Now, just before we go too far into this, I want to tell you, I'm not a proponent of, like technology. I'm not saying that. I'm very balanced with it in my own life. Actually, my kids, my personal children are limited to 45 minutes a day. I don't plug them in all the time. So there's a balance. Somebody mentioned it earlier, balance of technology. Absolutely. But what we do have to discuss is how it has impacted the world, because it has changed the context. And if we are going to have appropriate methods for education to achieve our purpose, which we all believe we need to do with students, and we all believe they deserve, then we have to understand the context to be able to think about how the methods, what we can utilize about those tools, and how we can make those methods work well in this time frame. So how has it changed the world of work? Where do you work? Everywhere, right? Everywhere you have that portable device that can go anywhere and everywhere, which is kind of neat. I mean, actually, it is kind of neat to be able to work in different places. You don't have to go to a space, a particular place to work. So that's a good thing. When do you work? All the time. Yeah, that's the bad part, right? It's the bad part. You can work anywhere, but you can also work anytime, and then you're expected to right? Kind of expected to do that. So how are jobs and careers changing as a result? Because obviously, part of being prepared for life is being able to get a job, right? Like somebody said in the early one of our summits, my highest hope is just that my child will be able to live independently from me. So we do, that is an important thing in life, right? So how are jobs and careers changing? These are old statistics, but I keep using them because I think that even makes it more amazing that if you look at the report, 2001, U.S. Secretary of Labor reported that the average 34-year-old had changed companies 9 times. Yeah, wow. I mean, that's like after getting out of college at 22 or 23, right? So that's a lot. So they're changing, constantly rapidly changing. There are careers disappearing, and there are careers emerging that we don't even know what all these things are that are out there now that are available to them. Here's another statistic that could scare you if you have children, and that is that 80% of today's third graders will be entrepreneurs, like the gentleman was saying back there about entrepreneurship. What does it take to be an entrepreneur? Oof, drive, motivation, independent thinking. Some of the things y'all said earlier that you want for your kids, you're right to think that, because many of them will be entrepreneurs. They will run their own business. Does that scare you? Okay. No, she says, no, not at all. They're ready. She's like, no, it's not my business, it's their business. So they need to be prepared for that kind of work. That's an exciting thing to be able to do that, but they need to be prepared for that. And then, of course, we know the market's changing because the work can move to the worker anywhere in the world, and because of the emphasis on math and science in some other countries, and because of large populations in other countries, our students are competing with everyone in the world for their place in the marketplace. That is a fact now. So it is important to understand that and make sure that we're giving them a good opportunity, right, to be able to compete and land a good job that makes them happy and productive. So that's the context. We have digital natives. Dr. Waddell asked you to hold up those devices earlier. How many of you had your child tell you how to use that thing that you held up? Okay, quite a few, right? And did they need the manual for that? No, right? They just go, oh, they know how to do it. Digital natives, they've been immersed. They understand how this stuff works, kind of almost intuitively, naturally. And so they do operate in a different realm, definitely because of that. Good or bad, that is just where we are. That is the context. We also, because of technology, biotech, advances in medical tech, et cetera, and just because of the tipping point of the progression of mankind, we have had a population. We have 7 billion people inhabiting a planet that not very long ago, 1 billion inhabited. So with that, there are things we have to address. Is there going to be a shortage of water, for instance, which we know a lot of people in the world today do not have drinking water that they can use. So there are environmental issues, and our children are going to be the ones having to solve these problems, right? Some of you said creativity and problem solving earlier, and independent thinking in that way. Global village, the interconnectivity of the world is very different than it was when we were growing up. So it does change, and it's been mentioned how we need to understand the world around us, understand the diversity, be able to interact. Who would have predicted that due to social networking on Facebook, we would have revolutions and oust governments? So it's an interesting way that the world has changed, the context of the world as a result of what's happened with technology. And it's created the volatile economy. As a result, we've got different countries propping different countries up, and we have all this interconnectivity. And so understanding that and how we need to function, and then just being good creative problem solvers and facing those complex challenges is very critical in this time. So the context of Workplace 3.0 is very different, right? And even Lifestyle 3.0 is very different. We see technological tools that people are using, more specialized. This is an assembly line, but it's different work on this. What's happening to the jobs that we saw earlier that were the repetitive tasks on the assembly line? What's happened to those? The machines are doing them. It's automated, right, through technology. So pretty much everything, if you read Dan Pink and listen to him speak, pretty much everything he talks about, and he gives tons of examples, pretty much everything that can be automated is being automated. Like he talks about you can get a divorce online, So watch out, law school may not be your best bet. Sorry if there's attorneys in the room. I'm not. That's Dan Pink. That's not me. But we know that anything that can be automated pretty much is. So now it's like quality control, creative problem solving, troubleshooting. There's still jobs there, but they're different kinds of thought process. A variety of tasks happening in the same setting. The workplace looking different, looking more like this. In fact, I was going to mention there's the old computing center down at the bottom, right? And then here's how computers are being used now at the top. Different. So in that context, what skills do students need to thrive? In the context that we're living in, what skills do they need to thrive? 30 seconds with your neighbor. fast heartbeat. That's all right. So let's just hear real quick. We won't pass the mic on this. Let's just hear real quick some of the skills that you talked about. Just raise your hand and say it. Communication skills. Great. Cooperation skills. Adaptability. Absolutely. What? Another language. At least one secondary language you say. Yes. Critical thinking skills. Problem solving skills. Flexibility. We know it's all going to keep changing, so flexibility to be able to adapt. Yes. Communication skills, oral, written, using the technology like the gentleman said earlier. Fantastic. Yes. Being able to multitask. Lots of different kinds of things going on. Work ethic. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, you starve if you don't. Yes. Okay, understanding current events in other cultures because you may be working with them because it could impact your world now. There's so much interconnectivity. Okay. And you might be working, right, virtually with people from different countries all over the world. Fantastic. Yes. Very good. Knowing how to learn, she said, so that they can relearn over and over as things change. Back here. Understanding group dynamics, understanding how that works. A mom of a first grader was telling me the other day we were working on an instructional initiative and they were doing a lot of project-based learning group work. And anyway, she said her son came home and said, my group won't listen to me. So she's like, you need to understand that. Yes, ma'am.
I would say prioritizing would be extremely important because so many things will be thrown at them at once. And balance, I think, is a key. Being able to balance your life because you can get thrown into the fast pace, even where we are today. I can't even imagine what it would be like for our children.
Fantastic. So she's saying balance, being able to prioritize. So we heard multitasking, and then also in that environment of everything being thrown at you, being able to prioritize, and also understanding that balance is so important that you can't, you can't do everything that is coming at you. You have to balance that in your life. Yes. Oh, that's good. Okay, so self-awareness, she said self-awareness as well as the group dynamics. So understanding yourself so you know your own strengths, what you can contribute appropriately, as well as the rest of the group. Yes, ma'am. Sure, yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, so what she's saying, in case you couldn't hear, is just the work environment is changing. So it's not just the spaces where you're collaborating and problem solving, but it's also doing away with office space completely, and you're working from home, so you're working independently, maybe virtually with other people. And by the way, I do this a lot. So there's a whole different dynamic working virtually with people over the phone and through video conferencing and the ethics and group dynamics of that, as well as, in person. So, right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. So there's lots of different dynamics. That's right. That's why you do video conferencing, but then, of course, you have to get dressed. So it's a problem. So there's advantages. Who cares if they listen if I don't have to get dressed right now? Just joking. Yes. That's right. You just have to get dressed from the waist up if you have the appropriate backdrop. Mm-hmm. so that. Yeah, we're already using it. Okay, so just to recap, because I know we don't have the mics, is the idea that they need to be able to take a task and problem solve that with a vision for what's going to happen in the future and moving forward with that. So challenging them, she says, is important. I do want to give a caveat, by the way. We're not evaluating anybody's ideas. So anything that's shared, we're open to all the ideas. So you can share your idea, but we don't want to evaluate other people's ideas. But the idea that as the world is changing so rapidly, these students need to be challenged to push themselves further and take a task and be able to follow it through and solve that problem with a vision towards the future because things are changing so rapidly. Fantastic. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. So taking care of wellness and physical needs in that context to make sure that they can stay, have that quality of life as human beings. That one, and then we'll go on. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they need those social skills to be able to interact and talk with other people. Yes, ma'am, right there. Sure. So we talked a lot about the soft skills, and she's saying also in addition to that, the hard skills of the business skills like selling, closing a sale, financial responsibility, and understanding how those things work. So that's a lot, right? There's a lot of things that we're saying, a lot of complex kinds of skills that we're saying that students need. H.G. Wells says civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. So if you believe what he says about that, then we need to be serious about making sure that we are preparing them in the way that we're talking about, that we're giving them those skills. So it's not saying, like I told you that story, just because my mom now uses like the oven bag for her roast, doesn't mean she's saying my grandma McKinley wasn't a good cook, right? She's just using methods and tools that are available to her now to do the best that she can to fulfill that same purpose. And so that's what we want to discuss for a minute, because most of the time when I'm traveling around and I'm in classrooms, and I have not been in one classroom in LISD, so I give you that caveat, but I'm traveling all over the nation and actually in the UK, like Dr. Waddell said, and I'm going in classrooms, and I'm still seeing Education 2.0, right? I'm still seeing the classroom set up that way for the most part. I'm seeing still a sorting tracking system. I know a grading system. Those things that we talked about with Education 2.0 seem to be still applicable. So here's what we want to talk about. We have the exciting opportunity because not every generation gets this opportunity, right? We see the context has changed, and now we have the opportunity to discuss what we can do using the tools that we have available today in this new context to help students gain the skills that are not only just nice to have, but sounds like from your conversation, imperative that they have for us to do well as a society, an economy, and for them individually to be able to lead healthy, happy, productive lives. So what are your ideas about, in this new context, what they need to be doing in school every day? What does learning need to look like for them to possess those skills? I'm going to ask you, because you've been, I don't know if you know this research, but Eric Jensen says that you need to move people at least as often as the number of minutes that equals their age, and it's been about 20 minutes. So I think we need to move, right. So I'm going to ask you you can just stand up where you are, but then look for me in about 2 minutes. I'm going to have you talk about the learning and what the learning needs to look like about 2 minutes, and that way you can stand up. And then about 2 minutes, we're going to sit back down and talk again out loud. I could all the time, but I could not do that. The bag helps, though. Can you use the bag? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to take this.
We're gonna pass the mic again. So like we talked about, trying not to repeat. I mean, building on. I love the way y'all are building on each other, which is fantastic. We're trying not to repeat ideas again, so that people can more people can share. And then also, if you've already spoken, maybe if you would let other people speak, and that way we'll continue to get more voices out of the audience. That would be fantastic. So we're just talking about what does Education 3.0 look like, right? What are students doing in school in the context we're talking about now? Yes, ma'am, right here. If you don't mind standing up, thanks.
Actually, I wanted to respond to the idea of challenging students. With the current grading system, if you really try, you go out there on a limb, you do a project, something that's different and unique, but you don't get exactly what the curriculum said or the text or the tax test, and you make a bad grade, what's the incentive to try again? So I think we need to change the way we grade. Now, I don't have an exact answer, but...
Yeah, that's great. I like what she's saying. She doesn't have the answer, and that is true, right? We're going to work together to be creative problem solvers and solve. So right now we're saying, what do we need to do, right? What do we need to do? And then we'll figure out how. So great, thanks. The grading system, getting rid of it, sounds like it's resonating with some people. Yes, right there.
I had a thought that, we keep talking about how we can shape our children for the future, but our children are the future, and they're going to be shaping it. So we need to prepare them to shape the future, to be inventive, to make changes. If 80% of the third graders are going to be entrepreneurs, they're going to be deciding your housing. They're going to be deciding all these things. And that's what we need to be doing. We don't need to be putting them into the mold. We need to let them find the mold.
Right. So what should they be doing in school to help them be prepared to shape the future?
They need to be, they need to be making them aware of what their importance will be, making them feel important, and that they are building that future. Okay. And then how they can do it, and let them make the roads or make the decisions on how that they're going to do that. Each child has different ideas of what's important to them, and some of those ideas bloom into Google or bloom into, Facebook and things like that change the world.
Sure, absolutely.
And we are limiting them in a way. And I think sometimes,
Great. So like we've already heard, individualizing, honoring the individual talents and interests of children, like we've heard already, and then helping them to understand their value so that they can continue to shape the world. And they're already doing it right now. A lot of them are having an impact right now. Right here.
Given that very point, individualized instruction. If you think about how some of us went to school, the SRA reading packets, right? We all read at our own level and were tested on that. Technology today would allow us to do that in a heartbeat. There are programs out there right now where every child in a classroom, given the gamut of what we've talked about, the fact that kids need to be connected to Sanford, the fact that kids have spelling issues, every child could be on a computer in a classroom learning at their own level, testing on their own level, and getting what they need. And that's the kind of technology that we need to be bringing in and using.
Okay, and I appreciate what she's saying, because some people have said, well, we've tried to reform and individualize for some time. The good news is now we have some tools that will allow us to do that, is what she's saying. We can use the technology to do that. Let me go right here. She's been waiting, and then we'll come down. Yes.
Just kind of a spin-off of what she was saying. I've recently been doing an after-school program dealing with underprivileged students, and I can tell you that the curriculum that I'm dealing with every day has to be modified. And I think from a technology standpoint and from a teaching standpoint, to be able to reach each individual child like that, the change has to come from the teaching aspect of it, and not just, this is the way we've always done it, let's go ahead and continue to do it that way. So I think on the teaching level, that needs to change as well, as how we're presenting things to our children, and include that technology in there, and be able to include the different aspects of ways of teaching, not just to a whole class as a whole, but to the individuals.
Okay, fantastic. So for students in school, they would be doing different things. If we're individualizing, you're saying that during the school day, they would be doing different things. And we'll talk about the role of the teacher in a few minutes too, but they would be doing different things during the day. Let's go here, and then we'll come over there.
I really liked what the lady, I can't see her, so what she was saying over there. I remember those packets and how motivating it was to watch. You're competing with yourself, and you're progressing. And there do have to be grades, just because we have to know what's happening. We have to be able to assess. But it is good to instill that self-competitiveness so that you are becoming your best self. But also, I was going to say, when we talk about group work in the classroom, I know many of you have had the experience of you're in a group and there's one or two people who are doing all the work. Everybody else is a slacker, and everybody together gets the same B+ and that doesn't teach the people who slack off anything. So in a lot of contexts, the group work is less effective. So it's kind of an individual, depending on what you're doing. Also, for example, we're talking about we got to change things up. I don't know how many of you, I'm really old. I have 6 children ranging from 30 to 13. And I remember when phonics was really, really big, and we had a lot of great readers, spellers, and writers. Then they decided, we don't need to teach phonics. We're just going to let you spell whatever you want, do whatever you want. And then we have a whole generation of kids who can't spell, who don't read well. And so I'm not necessarily in favor of education changing things up just because we want to change. So we need to make sure and be very careful about what we're doing and not change just for the sake of change.
Absolutely. I can agree more. In fact, we've done a lot of that. And that's why we're talking about context and looking at where we are in that context so we can be strategic about what we change and what we build on from the past. I know, I'm sorry, I told you.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, I'm really interested in the concept of not grouping kids by age, but rather by their passion, their ability. The SRA thing, fantastic. Kids nowadays are not encouraged to keep moving on the things that they're interested in. They're given a ceiling. They do these fast math things today. They're only allowed to do 2 a day. My son would probably already have 100 done if he was allowed. He's so frustrated because he can only do 2 a day, and I don't understand holding kids back from what they're passionate and very interested in to try to keep the class together. It's probably easier to teach that way, but if somehow we could regroup the kids by their abilities and not just have a classroom full of all 9-year-olds that really have different passions and abilities and interests, it would really benefit them.
So that grouping and looking, one conversation please, that grouping and looking at how we can group them according to passion, according to interest, different ways that way, and then taking the ceiling off so that that self-paced work, they can continue to accelerate in different ways. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and that kind of fits into the conformity side of things that sometimes I struggle with. If we were to put a number on how long Education 1.0 worked, what would that be? A couple hundred years? 100 years?
Yeah, maybe 100.
Education 2.0.
I'm not sure how long it worked. I know how long it's been around, but a little less.
I guess if you take the ever shrinking nature of that, one of the things it seems that we need to really do is to teach our kids how to adapt, because they might be in workplace 3.0 or even maybe 4.0, by the time they graduate. Sure. But what's going to happen by the time they get to our age? Mm-hmm. What sort of skills are we setting up for them now to be able to have a career, a lifetime career? It's not necessarily a particular, you do this app, because we may not have apps. Right. So it's that adaptability over time and helping them learn how to learn.
So what would they be doing in school to make sure that was...
I think it goes along with some of the letting kids progress at their own rate, as opposed to the data manufacturer.
Okay.
And really helping kids excel. I too have one who would do fast math multiple times a day. I mean, runs upstairs right after school, kicks off the shoes, and they're right underneath the computer, and goes to fast math. And let's not hold that back.
Okay.
When they're that excited about learning, let's not hold that back.
And what she's saying about the rapid progression of technology, do y'all remember 8-track tapes? Monograph records? Okay. So if we just think about music, right, and then we go, remember when cassette tapes came in and they were so cool? And then, CDs, wow. And so the kids, but you know what, how do the kids get their music now? iPods, right? So you know what they're going to be laughing about in 10 years? Remember when we used to get our music on our iPods? Right? Like we're talking about 8-tracks? That's what they're going to be laughing about. How will they get their music? We don't know. Exactly, right? We don't know. There's something, but it won't be iPods. Promise you, it won't be iPods. So we don't know, right? We don't know, and this goes back to what the lady beside you was saying too. Adapting and looking forward and knowing that we don't know. They're going to, one of them is going to create how that next music is going to be delivered. We don't know what it is. They don't listen to the radio because that's like somebody else's version of what they want to hear. They're going to, it's all customized. So who has a mic over here now? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I worked with a neighboring ISD, and whenever the kids got in trouble or got behind or missed school too much, we put them into a classroom, a separate off-campus place, and they got individualized computer self-adjusting curriculum. And not only did they catch up to where they were supposed to be, some of them were a year behind, 2 years behind, but then they could accelerate. They could even be ahead. And so you had these failing kids with bad self-esteem getting in trouble, even when the parents are not helping at all. Parents are not cooperating with getting their own child educated. The child started seeing accomplishment. It wasn't them against, anybody else in a classroom. They were sat down with their own computer each day. They came in and they started, something grew in them, and that was a love for learning. And I think that the future that we have, I would like to see kids have that self-adjusting curriculum. I would like them to graduate at 14 if they can. I would like to see them not just have the computer, because I think we can double our kids as far as bringing them into the classroom, because they can do a lot of this stuff at home, and they can have a teacher who's in an office somewhere check what they're doing online and bring them in 1 or 2 days a week. And when, like right now in the PE classes, where we can take our kids to go compete in gymnastics, and that counts as the PE in class, so they don't have to be there. I think if our kids want to be in an advanced robotics class somewhere, that should count for a science. You know, it should count for something within. I don't want the school system to hold back anybody, and I think the classroom, the way that it is, has to be individualized. We do have to move away from it.
So what they should be doing in school is they should be doing a lot of things maybe not even in school, right?
Maybe not even in school, and have curriculum that is self-paced, that lets them advance or lets them slow down, and it tests anything that needs to be retaught.
Everything she's describing, by the way, is happening in some places. So it's not that it's not feasible. So appreciate all your creative ideas. And I know, yes, there you go. Yeah,
I just have a question. And my question is, if this same type of session will be offered for students to give their input, because I find that when I have a group of Girl Scouts, I've had them since first grade, now they're in 8th grade, and they'll come over and they'll complain. But if I stop and say, tell me what you think would improve your learning experience, they actually have very good ideas. So I would like to see them involved in this process as well.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So to answer your question, first of all, we actually have talked with the panel of students and asked them the same questions, and we're going to show you the video of that in just a few minutes. So you're segueing us perfectly for that. But also, we believe firmly in having students involved in the process every step of the way. Actually, Dr. Waddell talked about me being an assistant superintendent, and during that time, we started the student advisory, and we got our very best ideas of anything we were doing in our schools from our students, because they do have fantastic ideas. So they will be involved in every step of the process. We're doing focus groups with the students. They will be on the strategic design team. They will be on project teams. Any of them, obviously, we have had some students actually come to some of our sessions, our summits too, and they're welcome. You know, at certain ages, they are really able to contribute even in this setting. But because some of them are during the day, obviously they're not as able to do that. But we do have a panel. We'll show you some of their ideas on the same questions that you're being asked in just a few minutes. So thank you for your question. I'm going to go here with you.
Okay, I'll make it, real quick. I have a vision, I think, for what I would like to see students doing in school, and just a few ideas are, I would like to go in school where I see the kindergarten class working on more advanced skills, and I really think at each grade level, if you know, planned well, you should see some correlation between the kindergarten class, 1st, 5th, you know, on throughout 12th grade. So I would like to really see the primary grades doing a little bit more, you know, in math and science and some of the skills. I think there should be less talking with teachers. I think, you know, we talk all the time, and we don't give kids enough time to engage themselves and learn, you know, and during that time. So I think students should be more engaged. I think there should be less furniture in the classroom to allow for kids to really do the innovation. I think kids should go to innovation labs where that looks like they're inventing something from beginning to end, integrating all the subjects in that, your math, your science, your cooperative learning, your problem solving, all that really can be incorporated in to something like an innovation lab or, you know, your innovative lab. And it also gives kids something to look forward to come to school every day. And, you know, we used to be the leaders in innovation, and now I think China and a couple other countries are ahead of us. So why not train our kids that way now, early? And so I think a part of the day should be spent for that. And I think Skype, you know, we have all the technology. I think kids should be in other classrooms all over the world so that they can not only experience the culture, but also other teachers have a lot to share. So I think we have to take the walls out, if you will, of our classrooms and engage ourselves, you know, globally. So I think there's no reason why we can't use the technology we have for a lesson to be taught, you know, from a teacher in Korea or a teacher in China. And it allows our kids to be there, if you will, and appreciate the diversity. So those are just a few things.
Just a few things. Thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, real brief, we're going to go here and then. great. Mm-hmm. Sure. Why not use other sources and opportunities for kids to learn from? That's great. So in case you couldn't hear, just also building on this idea of extending the walls of the classroom, knocking those things down, using the resources that you have here in the Metroplex, which are many, and also obviously you're the resources here in your community, which obviously there are a lot of people that are interested in being connected and being meaningfully integrated into the school system, because so many community and business members have come out even to the summits to share. So you have these rich resources here, and she's saying utilizing all of those things as a meaningful part of their education process and knocking down those walls a little bit more. Yes, ma'am. Do you mind standing up?
With anxiety, depression, and ADD, ADHD on an all-time, like going through the roof, I'd love to see a little downtime.
Wow. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Ken Robinson, on the topic of ADD, have you seen his RSA animate? Yeah, it's sobering. Yes. Good stuff. Yes, okay, last one.
There are programs out there that are already working called Destination Imagination that I would love to see incorporated in the school's curriculum.
Fantastic, thank you. And so that's a great way for me to say, too, we know a lot of what works now, right? We've seen some things work, and so now we're talking about taking some of those pockets and spreading them, is what I'm hearing from a lot of you. I'm giving you a couple of resources here. Just one of the great things about the technological advances is that we know a lot more about the brain and how students learn than we ever have before. A lot more about that. So we can build on some of that research, some of the things that we know work for students, and utilize those resources. And so we have, with everything that we're talking about a huge role for teachers, right? It's a big job already, right, just to have the students. But now we're talking about a different kind of this Education 3.0. That's the next thing I want us to discuss for a few minutes. In this environment that we're describing, in this context, breaking down the walls, all these things that are happening, I firmly still believe there is a very, very important and valid role for the teacher. So what is that role? I want y'all to talk about that for a few minutes. And remember, if we can keep the conversation to that, and then the next step is going to be, then what does the system do to support that? Because if this is the role that we're asking of teachers in this kind of context, then what does the system need to do to allow them to fulfill that role? And then we're going to talk even about how we measure what we're doing differently, possibly. So we've already heard a little bit about grading. So for this next one, just let's talk 1 minute with your neighbors. If you want to stand up, you can. 1 minute with your neighbors. Role of the teacher in this context of Education 3.0.
You go to the next, then a lawyer, and then at the very end. It's about the concept. It's about.
Thank you very much. Thanks for quickly coming back together. Let's hear from a few of you on this idea of what is the role of the teacher in this environment, in this context that we're talking about. We're talking about breaking down the walls of the school, right? What is the role of the teacher in that? I guess they're free too, right? I don't know. So let's hear a little bit. Yes, sir, right here. Oh, a moderator. Okay. A moderator of those experiences. Yes, ma'am. An expert. Still an expert. An expert in what? Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay. Know their material. Fantastic. A mentor. Very good.
With the opposite of her.
Okay.
We're not experts, and we shouldn't be expected to be, but the kids should be able. We are more facilitators.
Okay. Facilitators. Okay. Fantastic. Fantastic. There's a great book, Windows on the Future, by Ted McCain and Ian Jukes. It was published in 2000, and they had this crazy, outlandish idea in that book in the year 2000. And their idea was that at some point, teachers would be free to facilitate and take students deeper because, this crazy idea, because every student would have this device, they said, some kind of device on their person that would have all the information possible. I mean, and in 2000, when we were reading this, and we'd studied it with some of our teachers, it was like, yeah, right, you know. And, I mean, literally, only 11 years ago, and now it's like, oh, yeah, y'all are laughing because they have it. Yes, back there.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I have 2 kids in the school district right now.
Hi, Catherine.
I'm thinking along a 3-line. I don't know if 3 keeps coming up.
Okay.
But the first process is we need the foundation. So we need teachers in the classroom, pretty similar to what we're doing now, teaching the basics of math, reading, writing,
Mm-hmm.
The basics.
Okay.
This, like we talked about. And then at the second level, or the middle school level, or if you want to say, is more of the facilitator, collaboration actually
Mm-hmm.
happens there. And then at the third level, it would be more of integrating into our businesses, like we talked about over there. And then that can really back around and have kids almost be the teachers. Like, I think I want to go back to elementary school and learn some of these same things in the facilitating and the collaboration, and then back into some of the business world.
Okay.
Again. So, I mean, I also think that we're thinking about kids here.
Right.
But I think we also have to start thinking that, yes, we're thinking the adults in this situation is the teachers, but I'm also thinking that I'm not either one of those, but I want to go back into the system.
Awesome. That's great.
The public education might not necessarily just be children, it might be adults in the community as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so just, I want to recap because she didn't have a mic. But what she's saying is kind of, she's thinking of a 3-tiered kind of system maybe, or 3 levels, 3 layers. One is teaching the basics, you know, kind of like what we saw, the basics of literacy and those kinds of things. A next level is kind of this facilitator. And then at another level, maybe it is helping students integrate like into the business world and do those kind of things, make those connections. And then the final comment was just that that's not just, those are not the only adults, just teachers that would be involved in that process. But also, she's saying, I'd like to get involved in that process. So parents, community members, et cetera, coming into that process to help facilitate all of those levels. Thank you. Yes.
I would also say that teachers would then assume the role of encourager or of motivator, somebody to get those kids to continue to press those walls to learn more things.
Fantastic. So pushing them and challenging them like we've heard you, pushing them on. Who else? Other thoughts? So we kind of said it maybe, right? Facilitator, mentor, encourager, motivator, moving people forward. Yes?
It's good to facilitate and mentor and everything, but we also still have to keep the kids accountable because everybody will take the path of least resistance. So there has to be a challenge and there has to be an accountability, but at the same time realizing that not everything is black and white. There's more than one way to solve a problem, and it's okay at the higher levels especially to say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but let's find out together.
Good. Okay, so modeling some of those same skills, being a model of some of those things, the problem solving and creative thinking as well. Thank you.
And just collaboration. I mean, you could have the 2 teachers that are at the same level and have 2 different ways of approaching a child, and also including parents in that collaboration. I think a lot of times we don't include the parents in how their child is learning. I don't know how my child learns, but the teacher might know. So I think just collaboration all the way around.
Fantastic. Working together, having a system that allows for that collaboration piece. Yes, right here. Leadership. Leader. Teachers being leaders. Right there.
Knowing with budget cuts and the number of students they deal with as a result, just not heaping expectations from a meeting on people who are already overwhelmed with an incredibly diverse student population in their class and a variety of learning skills, but maybe perhaps at earlier grades, dividing up in those teachers who are skilled in certain areas, really teaching those areas that they're best suited to teach, rather than expecting them to a one-size-fits-all, they teach every subject under the sun. I know we do that in older grades, but maybe moving that a little further down in the elementary schools so that they can specialize.
So maybe looking at not a one-size-fits-all system for teachers either, but somehow looking at their diverse strengths. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I wanted to kind of relate just briefly. My 10-year-old last night said a great idea for a video game would be to be able to try out different jobs and be a marine biologist and then move to the next level and try this. And it made me realize that it'd be really cool if teachers in the classroom could, even in elementary school, tie in industry and teach that math and science equals video game programming. And the cool things you can do that it's, what am I going to do with this? You actually can do some pretty cool things with it. So.
Very neat. So teachers tying that stuff back to real world, real experiences. Very good. And again, the idea that someone shared about using ideas from the students. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to comment on a lot of what's been said. It seems to lead to partnership. For example, in my son's classroom, it was individualized where that class could decide certain things, maybe the reward system, or, it had boundaries because the teacher must have control and lead and be, in that leadership role, but really also be a good listener and integrate the participation from the children. So you can individualize it maybe even per class while it's still in the classroom setting.
Fantastic, fantastic. So again, more individualization, but she's saying a partnership. And so I'm hearing that. I challenge you to figure out ways to do this, what you're saying, because it is a big role. It's a lot that we're talking about in this change. But together, you can do it. You can do it together if you find ways to tap into all these resources that you're talking about. That's fantastic. And also, by the way, the next question following, we're going to watch the student video, but the next question after that is how does the system support all this too? So thinking about system ways to create that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I know I already spoke once, but hearing everybody talk about this, I graduated from a liberal arts college. You think about it, this is exactly what we're talking about. We got a little bit of everything. We got the situation in some of our classes where we sat around in a circle and our philosophy professor threw something out. We got in a situation where math class where we actually had to have the professor stand up in the front and show us how to work out the problem. So I think that what we need to do is we need to think out a way to model our schools like that. Students need a little bit of everything. They need that diversity, which is what we've all been talking about. And our kids can be engaged by the fact that, hey, you're going to get that good grade on a test. You're going to be accountable. Because you know what? If I'm not paying attention in class, then I'm going to fail. And that's the simple basics of everything, So model maybe our schools after some of the best liberal arts colleges in the country.
So use some of those resources out there that are encapsulating some of the things that you're already saying. Fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna watch the video because I want y'all to get a chance to hear from the kids, and then we'll ask the last question. Oh, and I think I told you, we asked the kids the questions. So you're going to hear, we took the questions out, but you're going to hear what their hopes are, what they think learning could look like, what they think teaching could look like, and what they're hoping for in 10 years.
I hope to become a neonatal nurse, and I'm going to attend Texas Tech, as well as build up to become a nurse practitioner.
I want to be a pediatrician. I love kids, and I just want to help them in as many ways as I can.
I plan on going to college, and then I have no clue what I'm doing after that.
I want to be an engineer, or at least something in the math and science fields.
I think that teaching needs to be more hands-on with the students. And technology is more incorporated. We need to have hands-on learning, practical applications for stuff we learn, because
in math and science especially, it's really challenging for me because I'm like an English person, but like when we can apply math and science to things in daily life and like how things actually work in the world, it really like connects it and it makes it stick better in my brain. So like I think teachers need to use more technology and like practical applications to really connect the students to what they're learning and help them like utilize information.
I think the new bring your own technology thing is a step in the right direction, because if you're like a doctor and you don't know what a word is, you're going to be like, let me find my textbook. You're just going to get your phone out and search the word, you know. So in real life, it's not put your phone away, put your laptop away. You can use all your resources. So being able to use our resources helps us to learn better and learn on our own, which helps me best. I think the teachers need to be more updated on technology, because though they may know math and science and whatever better than us, we can work an iPhone and iPad better than they will ever know how. So if they were more up to date with their technology and knowing how we could use ours, we would be able to use it better, and they would be able to teach us with it so we could utilize it to its full potential.
And if we could put like textbooks onto the iPad and maybe put a barcode on it, and they could check one out and take it home and have the textbook app on it, like have textbooks on it, it'd be a faster way to learn, and we wouldn't have to worry about like the 4 books that we have to bring home and then turn back in later in the year. So that would be a better way to organize stuff and get it more into the future.
I mean, like school web, there has been times when that web page cannot be shown.
I'm a visual learner, personally. I like when teachers give us like graphic organizers and things that I can, have a picture associated with a bunch of words, not necessarily just reading text out of a textbook. I think it's very important to engage your students in everyday instruction, because you don't just want them to be sitting in the desk and be handed 6 worksheets that have to be completed, and then that's your class time. The teacher should be, actually teaching like up in the front and, doing activities, group activities, stuff to remember the information more than just, here's your worksheets. It's going to be like this every day and very routine. We need like a little bit of different stuff to do. You don't want to go into a classroom and just be like, like a scary noise comes up like dun dun dun, like you're going into a classroom. But I think it should be comfortable, and group tables like for discussions and stuff should be available instead of so much individual learning, because like I said before, you can learn a lot better in groups. So.
Like engaging the students in a class discussion or something, because class discussions really help me as well as visual and audio and group work and lab work and science and stuff. I think it's important for teachers to help build a mutual respect between the students and the teacher, as well as just amongst the students in general. It's just kind of, all right, I can do the math here, but like what is this? And I got an AP test in May, so I'm really trying to understand what's going on before we move on to the next thing. So being able to work in an actual lab with the materials that we're learning about, hands-on with my peers, and just being able to comfortably talk about it with the teacher and other students really helps me. That goes along with the hands-on thing. It's just kind of being able to really see it. I think if, more outside world hands-on activity.
I think as far as the school district being run better for our education, it's a whole generation gap thing again, because they grew up different than we did, so they learned different. Like they didn't have video games and all that stuff, and the higher-ups are normally older, and they grew up in a different time, and they were exposed as much, and with TV and everything bad and different now, we just learn different, and I think they really need to study and figure that out, that we're not just like them. We didn't go out and play when we were bored when we were little. We played video games, so it's a generation thing.
I think that if something gets removed, there should always be something to replace it, and reasoning as to why it benefits us. in a better way?
I think so, like, because we're doing all of these, like, information sessions and all of these things to try to change the future. I think definitely in 10 years it's going to be, like, maybe almost the total opposite. And we're going to hope that we were in that environment rather than how we are now, I guess.
Maybe, like, in 10 years we probably won't even have textbooks anymore. And then it'll all be technology-based, and hopefully maybe every classroom in every school could have a computer access for every student to use, and like projectors for teachers to show visuals, like Morgan was saying.
I agree. I think LISD has like great potential and has like amazing opportunities ahead of us. If the students know more about the schools and the like opportunities we have, we can do such great things. We could all like change our learning, and we could all just enhance our high school and our middle school so much better because we can learn such like more diverse things now.
I agree too. I think LISD has great potential. So it's great to hear the student voice, like we were hearing. And what I want to tell you, we're getting to the end of our. So many great ideas. Hard for me to stop you and move on sometimes, but I do want to leave you with a couple of thoughts because, like I said, this is the beginning of a dialogue. So we have some other forums that you can contribute some ideas and thoughts, and you will have more after you leave here. We hope, for sure. And so this is Ken Robinson's quote about, and somebody was telling me yesterday, Einstein had a similar thing, like, let's strip down back to the essence of what we're trying to get done and think about it that way and not add anything back to that equation that takes away from it. So those limits that are being put on us, as many people have said today, let's not keep ourselves within those limits. So let's think about the current system. And y'all mentioned actually a lot of things already in our other conversations, like grading and changing schedule and the facility itself and those kind of things that maybe we need to change to transform the current system. What do we need to take away? That's one of the thoughts I want you to have because as we talk about reform, a lot of times people think about adding to. And so I want you to also be thoughtful about what do you strategically abandon and take away so that you have the energy and resources to do the things that are new and different as well as maintain those things that are working in this current context. And then the other question I want you to just continue to think about and maybe talk with your neighbors and community about, and some people have mentioned it today as well, is just this idea of how are we measuring schools and how are we deciding, what are you currently, how are you currently finding out about your schools as far as from the outside, whether they're doing a good job or not? What's the only information you have? Okay, state ratings, right? So is that valid information that tells you everything you want to know about what's happening in schools and school effectiveness? So having the conversation about what does it mean to have effective schools, what kind of information would you want to know? Is the grade good enough information about your student? Is the testing system giving us the accurate information that we want about our schools? Just having that conversation and talking about that, I think is important for you as a community to discuss and to think about what kind of information would make sense to know more about for your schools. Sometimes we just measure things because they're easy to measure, right? Instead of measuring the things that are important to measure for us. And the things that y'all said earlier today are not all measured by the standardized testing system. So we have a great opportunity, and I'm very excited about that. What's going to happen as a result of these summits here? I'm always hoping for more and more models of what this thing looks like, and I can see that you all coming together as a community and with your ideas and creativity that you're bringing to the table and thoughtfulness about this process. I know that you're going to be able to do this. Prepare them like we've talked about. I want to tell you you're not alone real quick because I want to give you another resource. There's been a group of superintendents that have been meeting and working and thinking together on top of the other jobs that they do as superintendent over the last 3 years. Dr. Waddell's actually been a member of this group. And those of us that work around the state and with different districts have been very appreciative of that work, and I've been involved with it some as well, and just what they're trying to get done. And they've come up with the idea of a new vision for public education in Texas. And they now have a group called the Visioning Network. And they've published a document that's really written kind of like a Declaration of Independence, like an Emancipation Proclamation. It's got these 6 articles that they address about what they see as a new vision. This is Education 3.0 that we've been talking about. So it's a great kind of article that you can go and look at as a result of their work and their perseverance with that. They've also been talking at the state level with representatives and other state legislatures, and they've actually been able to get a Senate bill passed, Senate Bill 1557, that actually allows 20 school districts in the state of Texas to opt out of the state accountability system and look for a way that maybe is a more effective way of showing accountability. So that's happening right now. And the bill was passed this summer, and it's in process right now of defining how that's going to look and what those school districts can do. So I want you to know that your thoughts and your ideas, it's just the time is ripe, right? The time is ripe to do what you're thinking of. No one else is who you are, where you are, when you are right now. You have an opportunity, and with the work that's been happening at different levels and some of the progress that's being made towards this new idea for education, I think you really have good timing in this process for you here. You can see that the process that we're using is, like was mentioned, very student-focused. It's community-based. It does not work without you. It cannot work without you. So we need you to be involved in forward-thinking like you are being. The process is very transparent. Everything is being posted online. Everything is being available to anyone who wants to be a part of it and see any of it. It's out there for everybody to view and still take part in. And we're kind of in 3 phases. So just a quick thing about how the process is going to work. The things you've shared today, as well as in the other 5 summits that we're conducting, all of those things are being videotaped, they're being transcribed, and all of those can be compiled and is going to be shared back with, probably be shared online as well, but it'll be shared back with our strategic design team. But we're in the input phase right now. That's kind of this first area, and that includes summits. We're going to hold focus groups. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the online survey, so it's another way to give your input on these questions that we've been talking about and asking, and the couple that we didn't get to today. So all of that is kind of input phase, which is going on through the end of October. And then in November, we're going to be meeting with a strategic design team that will have all that information shared with them to compile and start to narrow down some ideas and move towards project teams that will work on different projects and ideas for actionable plans in those different areas, so that by January we should have kind of like, this is what we're going to look at moving forward. That's not the end of the conversation, because once you start this process, you want to continue to look at context and methods and what we need to be doing. And it definitely won't be the end of having community involved in that process, because I know that's a philosophy and belief of the leadership of your district. So that's kind of our timeline and process. If you said, yes, I want to be a part of this, then you'll probably be getting a call to be involved at some level. But even if not, then definitely go online. If you don't want to do other things like commit your time, at least go online and look at some of the things that are on there. Stay informed that way and continue to participate in the process as much as you can. I think Karen's going to talk to you a little about how that can work.
First, thank you for coming this morning. A couple of things. One is, as Shannon mentioned, I will be putting all of the summits, obviously we have video cameras, so we've been recording, and so we're putting all 6 summits online. It will go live tomorrow. So if you want to hear what your other friends and neighbors throughout the district have been saying, you can. If you have plans this weekend and you talk about it and they say, oh, shucks, I couldn't make it, they can go on and watch it as well. There will be a survey that will somewhat mirror the questions that she posed to you. So if you are in the parking lot or tomorrow morning or talking with a friend and go, oh, I should have said that, that would have been brilliant, you still have an opportunity. And so you can go in and plug that information. Also, one more item. I really, really encourage you to get back to your office or home or on Facebook or what have you and say one thing that really resonated with you today about the summit, because we have one more. So we have one more opportunity for people just like you that want their voices heard and share their thoughts about what they want for their children. So I really encourage you to do that. But before you leave, Dr. Waddell would like to make some closing remarks.
Thanks for your attention and participation. I'm just blown away by the ideas that you all come up with. It's just very validating for me, in saying let's let the community in here and let's talk about these complex problems that are important to all of us. The level of thought that I've been listening to, I just have to commend you for that. I do want to let you know that I'm planning to have lunch with those students that are on there, and I intend to ask that young man what he meant by the higher-ups being older. Just who he thinks the higher-ups are, actually. But I'm also going to tell him that I'm studying up as fast as I can. And you are too. And we got a lot of studying up to do to keep up with those guys, which is what it's all about. And I want to thank you for taking this time. It's a big time out of your day to come here and meet with us and think with us. So a lot of good's going to come out of this. I'm absolutely confident of it. So thank you very much.